Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and today we are looking at a Sultai Flash deck. And we have a bit of a commander question, which is why Flash is on the screen as opposed to a commander. But before we get into that, happy Monday, everyone. It is currently Labor Day here in Canada, and I am off work. But this isn't my real job, so I thought I'd throw in one extra deck today as a nice little treat. This deck comes to us from a longtime supporter of the channel, Sam. Thank you so much, Sam, for sending your deck, and thank you for always helping and supporting the channel. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot. And what they did is they sent us a Sultai Flash deck. And one of the primary things they asked is, or said that there isn't a firmly decided commander yet. And if you've seen the thumbnail of the video, I'm going to suggest one of them. You can even see it up there if you're a keen-eyed viewer, but we'll get to that in a second. In the meantime, we'll cover what Sam has sent us. They said their potential commanders are Zimone and Dina, who is currently the setup, Tasigur, or Jorn, God of Winter. So those are the main things they're looking for. They're looking for which commander to use, and then general ideas of what cards might be missing and what cards we can put in to create a mana base, which we can definitely help with right now. Their one restriction is that despite it being a general Flash deck, every single card has to also be Flash. And saying that out loud makes me realize I have a card that I wanted to suggest that actually doesn't have Flash. I just got used to, there it is. I'm just going to take it off the list now. But yes, the idea is that every single card can be cast at instant speed, regardless of whether it is beneficial to the strategy or not. So before we get any further, this is a great time to say that this deck list on Tapped Out is available in the video description below. I highly recommend you put it into converted mana cost for this one, because everything in the current list is either instant, creature, or I think there's 2 flash enchantments. And considering every single card is at instant speed, it might be easier just to look through it by, going through and finding out what exactly... Oh, that's strange. It changed order. Maybe converted mana cost. That's a strange feature. Why would I not want it in order of 0 to 3? That's okay. So right here we can see all the mana costs of the cards that we want here, and that's really the important part. We don't particularly mind what type of card, because they're all going to fulfill the same need. And while you're in the video description below, do note that there is a link to our, big form that you can fill out and send me your own decks. I'd love to make a video of your deck. Just fill out the form, send it my way, and I'll take a look at it when I get to it. However, if you would really like your deck to be the next one I take a look at and support the channel much like Sam has, there is a link down there for you to be able to support the channel and skip the queue, making your deck the next one on the list. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's take a look at this deck, and mainly let's talk about our commanders and why I'm suggesting Tasigur the Golden Fang as the ideal commander. Now, Zimone and Dina, can I get this bigger? I can. Zimone and Dina are a pair of creatures that are close to my heart. I really like these characters, and I really like combination legendary creatures. I do like this flavor quite a bit. However, I don't think it necessarily belongs in this deck. Their main ability is that we can start growth spiraling by sacrificing creatures. And I do really, really like that. It makes a very interesting landfall deck. Obviously, once you have 8 or more lands, we can start doing this twice, getting a lot of value out of our creatures. And I think we did do a Zimone and Dina deck way back when. But for this Flash deck, we're pretty low on creatures for a strategy like this. We don't create tokens, our creatures don't come back from the dead, so it feels like we're really giving up our creatures to use this ability, or we're using this ability to primarily kind of, how do I put this, to kind of get value out of our creatures that are dying, which I'm going to take a moment to make a note for myself. as I thought of a card type that could be here. But yeah, so I don't see the synergy here so much. And the other thing that I think is the most important problem with it is that this deck has a bit of a mana problem. And not more than not in a way that it's been built incorrectly, but in the sense that we're building a flash deck, and the way that flash works in Commander is that the more mana you have, the better the situation is going to be, right? Now this is true for a lot of decks, but especially you want to be able to hold up certain spells over multiple turns, waiting for the best time to cast them. Because alternatively, right, we're just casting everything on our last opponent's end step, and that makes us incredibly predictable. But instead, if we have enough mana that we can cast one thing per opponent's turn, for example, we are getting really, really far ahead. We are keeping ourselves it's hard to pin us down of what we're doing, and we're going to get further in the game. And Simone and Dina do not guarantee mana ramp. If we wanted to use her or use them, I would say another thing I'd like us to do is to go up on lands, because we're not searching for the lands, we're playing it from our hand. We're really dependent on drawing our hands. So though a Simone and Dina version of this deck is doable, I think it's not the ideal choice. It would require a lot of fixing and rebuilding, and I don't think I particularly like that angle for a deck like this. So instead, I'm suggesting Tasigur. I really, really like Tasigur in these kind of decks. In fact, an early deck, really, really early in the format, probably when Tasigur came out, that I always kind of spitballed in the back of my head was a Tasigur kind of arms dealer kind of deck, where you would exchange favors like politics in order to get cards back from your graveyard. And I wanted that deck to be mostly at instant speed, so maybe this is a bit of my gut wanting to build that anyways, but also I do think it's a really good card. Tasigur is almost always 1 mana, or you're willing to pay a few extra mana to keep some cards in your graveyard. If you don't know already, Commander tax can be paid with Delve, so even as Tasigur gets more and more expensive, we are fine casting them at 2 or 3 extra mana, as long as or extra commander tax, as long as we have the cards in our graveyard to make up for it. Now at the moment, the deck doesn't have a lot of mill strategy in here or self-mill to take advantage of this, and we could put that in, but I don't think we need to be all in on Tasigur, right? Tasigur is not a commander we're going to put out as soon as possible. What we're going to do is we're going to play the game normally. We're going to develop our battlefield and our situation in the game and our lands. And once we have the means to play Tasigur, we're going to cast him out and just kind of hold him out there. The main reason we want to use him is for his ability. Now, he is a big boy. He is a very, very strong beater. And that's great, but we're really using him for the ability to get back key cards from our graveyard, which is a very, very strong sense of politics. Strong sense. It interacts very well with a strong sense of politics in your deck. Because what you can do is when your opponents are put into situations they need a solution to, they can make deals with you in order to get those cards out of your graveyard. You could say, hey, I can pull out a counter spell from my graveyard, target you give me the counter spell, I'll counter that spell, and in exchange, you can do something else for me. Or if you can be even more sly by suggesting I'm going to use Tasigur's ability, you give me back this card that is unrelated to the problem, and then on my turn, I'll deal with the problem. So that you get the card back you want, perhaps more ramp, perhaps something else. And with that, you can kind of negotiate your way into a stronger position. However, that's not even, necessary. At a certain point, you're just happy to sink mana into Tasigur because your opponents are going to have to give you good cards at a certain point. You don't play a lot of bad cards, and this is a pretty straightforward way to get card advantage. And as everyone knows in Flash, if you don't spend all of your cards, or you don't cast all of your counter spells, you're going to have a surplus of mana and nothing to do with it. And Tasigur is really, really good at eating that surplus and using it to get you some card advantage. So that's the reasoning I have to playing Tasigur. And now looking at the deck itself, the deck is very standard. it's playing a lot of the strong flash cards like Slitherwisp and where's our 5-drop Nimris and things like that. That are just really good in flash, but we are missing a few because of the constraint that they have to be instant speed, and we're not going to worry too much about that because it's just gone. They're just not accessible cards for us, so we're going to move on. What we're going to do instead is we're going to think about cards that we can add, and at the moment, there's not a lot of cards I want to cut, because a lot of these cards are just generically good, and what's going to happen is out of the collections of cards I'm going to suggest, I'm going to leave it up to Sam to kind of find the cards he wants to cut, because we don't have like one-for-one kind of cuts. Things like Spectre Sailor, for example, in full anime form, is a card that can be, you know, really good in certain situations, but when you play Tasigur, she's not as good, so we can cut her pretty easily because we already have a 4-mana card advantage engine. Things like that. Depending on the cards we slide in, there'll be different cuts here and there. And my goodness, that go for the throat art. And I will leave it up to the viewer and the deck builder to decide exactly what we're going to cut. So we're going to go into some card additions, and then after which we're going to talk about lands and mana bases a little bit. So what card additions do we want? Well, I want to start off by talking about the thing that I think the deck needs the most of, and that is lands and mana production. Now, it's not going to be great. We only have so many cards we can work with to increase our mana at instant speed, and because of that, I think we have to play every single one possible. Every one of these not only can be held up during your opponent's turns and used, but also open up our ability to play more and more cards, you know, that allow us to just get further and further ahead. So Joint Exploration is like the in-between of Growth Spiral and, let's see, what's the other one? At 4 mana, Eureka Moment. So this is the in-between of that. So for just the blue without the kicker, it's a decent scry 2 and draw, but with the kicker, we get to put a land on the battlefield tapped. So to me, it's a 3-mana spell. You're pretty happy with it, and it'll just put another land. It's not as great as just putting lands into play, but the fact that it also scries 2, I think pushes it over the top as a card I do particularly like. I will pause and come back and say, usually we'll look for cards that are in the curve that kind of compete with our commander. But once again, the commander I'm suggesting is 1 mana to be played and doesn't need to be played immediately, so we're basically just going to ignore that. All right, next on the list is Roiling Regrowth. This is another Harrow clone. Sacrifice a land, put 2 basics tapped, and just move on. Very nice, very easy, go up a land, you're pretty happy. Likewise, another one that's just been printed is Entish Restoration. You sacrifice a land, put 2 basic lands tapped. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, such as our commander Tasigur, you instead put 3 lands onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. So these are all pretty nice. I couldn't find anything else. I'm sure there's others, but these were the main ones that like came to me. One of the things I do like about these cards, especially the Roiling Regrowth and Entish Restoration, is that because they sacrifice a land, they are themselves putting 2 cards into the graveyard, which is nicer for Tasigur. And these cards do not lose power over time. I think once you hit a certain amount of lands onto the battlefield, cards like Joint Exploration lose a little bit of their power because the chances of getting those lands once you have like 8 or 9 lands in play is getting a little harder. Not that much harder, but a little harder. Whereas cards like Roiling Regrowth, Entish Restoration, or Harrow, which they both come from, is just always going to be good. The last land ramp card I have is a bit contentious, let's say, so I'll leave it to the deck builder, but it does work. It's Dictate of Karametra. It is flash enchantment, and it says from this point on, when players tap lands for mana, you get double mana from them. Now, this affects all players, which makes it not the best card at all times, because sometimes this is going to empower your opponents to get very, very far ahead. However, it is a mana doubler that is at instant speed that you will have access to first because you'll cast it on your last opponent's end step. And I'm going to suggest, with the way that this deck works, you should be the player with the most ability to take advantage of this kind of effect. And it might be better with you, especially with the fact that you have a mana sink in your commander. And so you're always going to be able to pool all of that additional mana that you've gotten into something, whereas your opponents are eventually going to run out of cards and not have anything to do with that extra mana. So maybe it's not crazy good, but I do really, really like this card, and I think it'd be worth considering if nothing else. If nothing else, it's pretty fun too in Commander to play this card and see what happens. I know a lot of people in our play groups are like this, where, you know, there are cards that you play not just for their strength, but for the zaniness of how they affect the game, and I think Dictate of Karametra is very much so like that. All right, so I have, after this, I think about 7 kind of suggestions. One is really straightforwardly Mystic Snake. Oops. A classic, let me just try to tab this in, there we go. A classic flash counter target spell creature. And the main reason I have them in here is because you are playing Frilled Mystic, and Mystic Snake is 1 mana less, in 1 colored mana less, I should say, in exchange for 1 power less. And I like that a lot more. We're in a 3-colored three-colored deck, excuse me. And so it does benefit our deck to kind of have a little easier time casting a spell like this. And I don't think that 3 power is going to be much different than 2 power. I think you're going to be happy either way. And then if you want both, you could just play both. Though I don't think you do, and I think Mystic Snake, my goodness, is going to be the better one for sure. Speaking of another card that functions not identically, but similarly to a card you have Unwind, but you don't have Rewind. I do really like Rewind in a deck like this, because it just enables another spell during the turn cycle, which is really nice, and you could kind of burn this on not the strongest spell, but like a halfway decent spell without much, without feeling too bad because you get the mana back. I will also note that untapping 4 lands is the exact cost to trigger Tasigur's ability, which is a really nice kind of coincidence. And if you use Dictate of Karametra, 4 lands is 2 activations. Very nice. All right, let's see what else. As a finisher, Hullbreaker Horror is just a very, very good card. It works very well in flash strategies. I'm a little surprised it's not in here already. And I think you'd have a lot of fun with it. It's very, very strong, and if nothing else, is just a beater, and you'll have a good time with it. And though I didn't put this in, but I will note it here, because I don't know to what degree it's kind of cheating, I'm going to say Shark Typhoon. Because Shark Typhoon can be cycled at instant speed. So I'm going to leave this up to Sam or anyone else building these kind of decks to decide whether or not this is cheating, but I think it definitely works well with the strategy and technically can be cast at instant speed sometimes. Let me see, is Necromancy in here? Because I was going to say no. Because I was going to say if Necromancy is in here, which is a card that you can sometimes cast at instant speed, I would say this should go in for sure. But since it's not, I will leave it to the deck builder to decide whether or not this is a inclusion. Now, I've got a few others here. Just a nice removal spell that I would, play probably over Putrefy is Beast Within. Beast Within is just a fantastic card, just one of the best removal cards in the format. And when you have a commander that's a 4/5, you're not too scared of a 3/3. So definitely like Beast Within in a deck like this. After which, another enchantment that I thought has flash that can be played in here is Dress Down. Dress Down is not the kind of card you often see in Commander, and I think that should change. One, it is incredibly affordable for the power level it represents, and 2, it is a very, very tricky card. It is a fun card that really changes setups and can possibly be very much so a blowout against certain kinds of decks. And I think it's just worth playing. Because remember, the floor of this card is it's a 2-mana cycler, and I do particularly like that. And the ceiling is very, very high. I would definitely recommend considering this card for the utility of it, if nothing else. There's something to say that a lot of your creatures are very, very reliant on their abilities, but you're not going to always have all your creatures out, and there's just going to be situations that you will be happy to cast this against, like, you know, lords or a combo that's about to go on the battlefield that could represent a very big attack, things like that that you just want to delay a turn. In addition, this card works really well when someone else casts a board clear and you don't want to counter it, because it allows you to get around allows that board clear to get around both like indestructible, regenerate, but also like blood artist effects and other kind of tribal effects to bring creatures back. And so supplementing someone else's board clear with a dress down when that board clear was already fortuitous for you is a really, really strong ability. All right, looking a little further, and not a board clear, but a quasi-board clear, is Evacuation. I think Evacuation is a bit of an underplayed card. If we are playing not that temporal, what is our very, very good, often played card? Never remember. Oh, you don't have it, so I don't know it. Our big Overload card that seems play in blue all the time and everyone's afraid of it. Clearly you can tell how much I value that card because I can't. Cyclonic Rift, that's what it is. I don't really think Cyclonic Rift is that scary. I think it's a fun card. But if you can't play it, you should at least play Evacuation. And if you're already in a deck that benefits from being at instant speed all the time, I think Evacuation gets a lot stronger. It also works in a lot of niche situations against, you know, opponents that have quite a few like token strategies or equipment strategies or aura strategies, where Evacuation is almost sometimes a little better than a board clear because of the instant speed. And when you cast it, you can redeploy your cards once again at instant speed at your own leisure. One of the things of an Evacuation ability that's at sorcery speed is that you're going to start discarding, but that doesn't apply here. And even with a few of your creatures, it can be seen as a bit of card advantage, because if you were to put Mystic Stake back into your hand, all of a sudden you have another trigger of that you can cast. It's almost like you drew a card. Just something worth considering. And this is just a random one that I saw that kind of caught my eye. Mocking Doppelganger. Mocking Doppelganger is a 3-mana clone, which you don't see often. And the caveat is that it can only clone your opponent's creatures, but with Flash, oh wait, it's 4 mana. Why did I think it was 3 mana? I think a bit of wishful thinking. Okay, so that does kind of, I don't know if I like this as much. There is that Flash copy in blue. Let's see if we can find it. Stunt Double. With that in mind, Stunt Double is probably just better, but the other one, what it does is it like goads the creature you make a copy of, and I was going to be down for that when it comes in as a 3-mana card and not a 4-mana card. But yes, if you're not already playing it, which I don't see you playing it, I think Stunt Double is just kind of a nice card. It just has a lot of utility to it. It's not a particularly interesting card, but it can be very good against certain strategies, and it can be good by getting doubles of certain ones of your cards. Words. Words are hard today. When you're on vacation, words are very difficult. Or I guess a day off. It's not quite a vacation. One other card before we go and talk about mana is Feign Death. Feign Death is... and Feign Death effects is a card that I could see a 1 or a 2 of here. I'm not going to really suggest it as more than that because we're not really playing a creature-based sacrifice deck, but we are in black. Let's go back to creatures so we can find how many targets here we really do care about. And I do see a lot of them with really nice enter the battlefield abilities, and other ones like Slitherwisp or Cunning Nightbonder, which we're really happy to keep on board so that we don't want it to them to die completely. So, though I wouldn't put an entire collection of it, especially because we don't have the ability to, like, for example, if we have Frilled Mystic and we're going to Feign Death them, we don't really have a sack outlet to then put them back on the battlefield, so it's a little tricky to get that counterspell off. But for something like the Ice Fang Quaddle or Snapcaster Mage, we're probably going to get value off of it of like a board clear or targeted removal or a block. And I think that's generally good enough to play the first Feign Death effect, or as we now can use as the best one, Not Dead Yet. Which I will always say, oh, I thought that was the name. Not Dead? Not Dead After All. Okay, I did like Not Dead Yet, but Not Dead After All. Oh, the name is so, so good. Please pick up as many of these as you can. As a Scan player in Modern, I am really excited for this card. And as a, Black Commander player, I also am really excited for this card. Pick up as many as you can. This is a card that will have value in the future, but I think this will be a very open set, so it shouldn't be too expensive for a while. Anyways, going back to it, I think playing one or two of these cards can be useful, but I think I just played the one. I think I just played Not Dead After All because the value of it can be very good, but the floor of it is it just kind of rots in your hand. However, with Tasigur, I don't think that's too much of a problem, and I think you can move on from there. All right, let's talk about mana bases. How do we design mana bases in 3 colors, and what are our options, and how do we do this? Well, something I would like to point out that a big part of designing mana bases is the budget of them. Sam in his post will say that he doesn't want to play fetches, shocks, and duels. And I think that's fair. I think he's already playing a fetch and a triome, a shock and a triome, but I do get the mentality of it. I think the professor from Tolarian Community College has a very good kind of, I don't want to say outdated, it's just a very old video, and I don't think it's wrong, but it is an old video about the practicality and how to build certain mana bases really, really quickly and easily. But I want to come from the more practical side. A part of the reason I built this channel and how I look at decks and deck building is the idea that budget exists, right? And either our budget is based on a monetary reason, which I think is very normal and fine. We don't all have like infinite money to just pour into decks. But also, a part of like building a budget is like, if I'm going to play with some friends, like I have a friend who moved here recently and I'm trying to get my claws into him to get him into Magic because I'm a bad person, right? But he also has a daughter and he doesn't have infinite money. So if I want to introduce him to Commander and I want to build some decks to play alongside of him, there is a budget concern to make the decks playable, but I don't want to sink in a bunch of money and just build too strong of a deck or convince him to build an expensive deck. So budget has a lot of kind of, ways it affects our deck building. And so we need to think of ways to kind of attack that budget while still building a functional deck. And a big thing, what I'm going to suggest before I even show cards and ideas, is that it's not like a finance thing. I hate the MTG finance idea, but it is a kind of awareness of which lands just recently got reprinted. And I think like the rule is, from what I understand, and I could be wrong about it, is that when a card comes out of a set, when a land is reprinted, let's take one example here, like Darkslick Shores. Darkslick Shores was reprinted, let's see, on the date, is it going to tell me actually what the date was? Probably not, right? Phyrexia All would be one. Whatever this release date was, it wasn't that long ago, but I think it's like 3 to 4 months after the case is usually when cards will be kind of at their cheapest, and then they will slowly creep back up. This is just advice I will give anyone. Unless you desperately need to, don't buy the card the second the set comes out, and especially don't pre-order the card, because that is when hype and everything is going to make these cards really, really expensive. Now, that's not like a hard and fast rule, as some of my friends know that they didn't pick up their Orcish Bowmasters and that went up in price. It does happen. But for generally certain cards, especially lands, you can give it a little bit of time to let the price sink down a little bit. So you can see here, for example, Dark Slick Shores that's been reprinted recently is only about $2, just under $3 Canadian, which is, American, which is really good for a card like this, and you can pick it up for that. So by knowing that, knowing this fast land has been reprinted recently, it's a great time to kind of attack it, pick up that card for these kind of decks. So starting with that, we're going to look at cards that are cheaper and, they've been reprinted somewhat recently. One of the cycles I want to bring up that is almost always cheap is, not this one. The Pain Lands. What are they called? I always forget. They were just printed in, I believe, where are they? In Dominaria, right? I could be wrong. Brothers War. My goodness, there's been so many sets this year. Let's go down to lands. Yeah, okay, good. The playset of the Pain Lands, which are lands that tap for 2 colors, but deal damage for the colors, has been reprinted recently. These are really easy duels to start with in any commander deck. Because they will deal damage, but they come in untapped, and you're pretty happy to get those. After which, another one I often like putting in are the check lands, which are lands that check to make sure you have a basic land type of one or the other of the colors it makes. So Woodland Cemetery, all of these cards. And this was printed in Dominaria Remastered, apparently, which is really, really nice. Was that the full, if it was the full set, those will also be very, very cheap and we'll be very, very happy. My goodness, look at all these cards. And it looks like it was the enemy ones only, which is fine. Pretty nice pickup there. You can grab these pretty cheaply, add those. The next ones I would like to take a look at is the, where are they? The other fast lands seem also particularly cheap, of Blooming Marsh and Botanical Sanctum. After the fast lands, I would probably look at the slow lands, which would be Deathcap Glade. Man, say that 5 times fast. And Dreamroot Cascade, just the slow lands to put them into the deck as well. And then maybe after that, I would look at the Pathways, which are the transform lands, which can go for, they're actually cheaper than I thought, about $2 or $3 depending on the card. Dark Boar is a little more expensive, and Clear Path as well. So it does, I think it might depend on which set it comes from. No, it just depends on the colors, which I think is fair. So depending on the colors that you pick up, you will hopefully get them under $5 or $10. Then the last ones I think are worth noting and are incredibly cheap are the, I don't know what these are called, but unless you control 2 or more basic lands. Now these tend to be better with fetches because you can fetch into them, but I think they're fine otherwise just as supplemental lands. So with all of these in mind, you might notice that I haven't named any tap lands, whether the bounce lands or the guild gates or the gain lands, which are lands that come in tapped and give you 1 life. I will leave that up to you to decide what smattering of those cards. Like, I don't like cards that unconditionally come in untapped, or they come in tapped. Don't look at my commander decks, I definitely play them. But if you could build a mana base avoiding them, you're probably going to have a better time. Now, don't get me wrong, something like Blooming Marsh, there will be times it comes in tapped and there's nothing you can do about it, but there are other times it will come in untapped. I didn't say let's say 2 or more opponents, right? These are the Battle Bond lands. And I don't know what they go for these days. Okay, about $10 American, or Canadian. I'm looking at the promo, $7 American. That's not too bad. Morphic Pool. Okay, so they're reasonable, and I should really pick up some of these myself, $5. I think these are really, really good, and I think technically they should be the first ones you play after, deciding what your power level is, because fetches and shocks will still be generally better because you can fetch for them. But these are really, really close as dual lands that just come into play untapped always in Commander. So these would also be on the list of cards to pick. And so generally try to fill out those play sets as much as you can first. And then after the fact, start looking at cards that come in tapped, start looking at cards that come in tapped with an additional ability, such as like the lands, the creature lands, or other types of, you know, lands with really good activated abilities or give you another ETB. But I would start with as many duels that come in untapped as possible. You want your decks to actually succeed, and you want them to have the mana that you want. Brina up here just peeking in, reminding me how much I love her. All right. I will say one more thing about lands before we finish off here, is that I know they're not, I don't usually talk about mana bases because they're not really the most fun kind of setup. The spiel I just said is probably the spiel I would say to basically any deck. So maybe I should just make a video at one point about lands and then just kind of reference it when I need to. But the main idea is that lands and a mana base are really, really important in a commander deck. You know, you need to play the right amount, and you need to play as many of your colors as possible, because nothing is going to be more frustrating when you play Magic than being not having the colors you need, not having the lands you need, and just losing because your deck just couldn't produce the mana you wanted, as opposed to being outplayed, or another way of, you know, doing your best and then losing, right? It's not satisfying to lose to your mana base. So it is something that you should really put some thought into and build, and it can be rather expensive in the ways that's also like not fun, because you're not putting in, you know, these awesome big cards and like getting away with giant effects. I say it, I'm showing like very cheap cards, but it is something that you will have to consider and you will have to think about at some point. So I do recommend thinking about it and revisiting your decks every now and then and trying to make the most out of them. All right, as I'm trying to do more often, I'll do a quick summary. I like this deck very much. The flash setup is really fun. I think Tasigur is the correct commander here. I think you'll get the most power out of that. After which I will suggest, you know, adding a few more ramp cards, because ramp is really, really important. Adding a few of the, you know, the flash or instant speed cards that I've suggested, but those are generally less important than the ramp itself. And then finally, going through the land types and the land cycles that I have, there we go, I have brought up to supplement the deck's mana and making it a lot functional. Sam did tell me that this is, you know, a draft of the lands, but I would obviously not recommend playing 22 basics in a 36 land deck. But everyone knows that already, so, you know, I would, if you want to pick up this deck as an idea and go with it, the land base is one that you'll have to reconfigure for sure. All right. Thank you once again, Sam, for sending this deck. I hope this deck list was, or deck assist video was helpful to you. And if you'd like to send me another draft, or if anyone would like to send me another draft, there is a link in the video description down below to the form you can fill out. And if you'd like to also support the channel like Sam has, you can do so there, and your deck could be the next one I make a video of. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, do the whole YouTube thing, I'd be very, very grateful. I have some fun things planned in the future. As soon as my wedding is over, there's a lot more fun things I'd like to do, but till then, I am going to try to make as many videos as I can. In the meantime, we might have a few weeks where there'll be less videos. I hope you're patient with me through that, but we'll make do with what we can. All right, everyone, have a fantastic Monday off if you have that, and if you don't, I'll see you soon. Good luck.